Hi, it's Dr. Jack, and I'm reading more of Ozma of Oz. We're coming toward the end of this book. It's gotten really exciting the past few days. I'm reading more of the chapter, The Fate of the Tin Woodman, and I kind of started that chapter yesterday. I just wanted to read a little bit of it because it was so exciting. But we'll continue. We just found out Dorothy has stolen the Gnome King's magic belt. While the child spoke, they could all see that she wore the magic belt, and a great cheer went up from all her friends, which was led by the voices of the Scarecrow and the Private. But the Gnome King did not join them. He crept back onto his throne like a whipped dog and lay there bitterly bemoaning his defeat. "But we have not yet found my faithful follower, the Tin Woodman," said Ozma to Dorothy, "and without him, I do not wish to go away." "Nor I," replied Dorothy quickly. "Wasn't he in the palace?" "He must be there," said Billina, "but I had no clue to guide me in guessing the Tin Woodman, so I must have missed him." "We will go back into the room," said Dorothy. "This magic belt, I'm sure, will help us find our dear old friend." So she re-entered the palace, the doors of which still stood open, and everyone followed her except the Gnome King, the Queen of Eve, and Prince Evering. The mother had taken the little prince in her lap and was fondling and kissing him lovingly, for he was her youngest born. But the others went with Dorothy, and when she came to the middle of the first room, the girl waved her hand as she had seen the king do, and commanded the Tin Woodman, whatever form he might then have, to resume his proper shape. No result followed this attempt, so Dorothy went into another room and repeated it, and so through all the rooms of the palace, yet the Tin Woodman did not appear to them, nor could they imagine which among the thousands of ornaments was their transformed friend. Sadly, they returned to the throne room, where the king, seeing they had met with failure, jeered at Dorothy, saying, "You do not know how to use my belt, so it is no use to you. Give it back to me, and I will let you go free, you and all the people who came with you. As for the royal family of Eve, they are my slaves and shall remain here." "I shall keep the belt," said Dorothy. "But how can you escape without my consent?" asked the king. Easily enough," answered the girl. "All we need to do is walk out the way we came in." "Oh, is that all, is it?" sneered the king. "Well, where is the passage through which you entered this room?" They all looked around but could not discover the place, for it had long been closed. Dorothy, however, would not be dismayed. She waved her hand toward the seemingly solid wall of the cavern and said, "I command the passage to open." Instantly the order was obeyed. The opening appeared, and the passage lay plainly before them. The king was amazed, and all the others overjoyed. "Why then, if the belt obeys you, why were we unable to discover the Tin Woodman?" asked Ozma. "I can't imagine," said Dorothy. "See here, girl," proposed the king eagerly. "Give me the belt, and I will tell you what shape the Tin Woodman was changed into, and then you can easily find him." Dorothy hesitated, but Billina cried out, "Don't you do it! If the Gnome King gets the belt again, he will make every one of us his prisoners. For we will be in his power. Only by keeping the belt, Dorothy, will you ever be able to leave the palace in safety." "I think that is true," said the Scarecrow, "but I have another idea, due to my excellent brains. Let Dorothy transform the king into a goose egg, unless he agrees to go into the palace and bring out to us the ornament which is our friend Nick Chopper, the Tin Woodman." "A goose egg!" echoed the horrified king. "How dreadful!" "Well, a goose egg you will be, unless you go and fetch us the ornament we want," declared Billina with a joyful chuckle. "You can see for yourself that Dorothy is able to use the magic belt all right," added the Scarecrow. The Gnome King thought it over and finally consented, for he did not want to be a goose egg. So he went into the palace to get the ornament, which was the transformation of the Tin Woodman. And they all awaited his return with considerable impatience, for they were anxious to leave this underground cavern and see the sunshine once more. But when the Gnome King came back, he brought nothing with him except a puzzled and anxious expression upon his face. "He's gone," he said. "The Tin Woodman is nowhere in the palace." "Are you sure?" asked Ozma sternly. "I'm very sure," answered the king, trembling, "for I know just what I transformed it into, and exactly where he stood. But he is not there, and please don't change me into a goose egg, because I've done the best I could." They were all silent for a time, and then Dorothy said, "There is no use punishing the Gnome King any more, and I'm afraid we'll have to go away without our friend." "If he is not here, we cannot rescue him," agreed the Scarecrow sadly. "Poor Nick! I wonder what has become of him. And he owed me 6 weeks' back pay, said one of the generals, wiping the tears from his eyes with his gold-laced coat sleeve. Very sorrowfully, they determined to return to the upper world without their former companion, and so Ozma gave the order to begin the march through the passage. The army went first, then the royal family of Eve, and afterward came Dorothy, Ozma, Billina, the Scarecrow, and Tik-Tok. They left the Gnome King scowling at them from his throne, and had no thought of danger until Ozma chanced to look back and saw a large number of the warriors following them in full chase, with their swords and spears and axes raised to strike down the fugitives as soon as they drew near enough. Evidently, the Gnome King had made this last attempt to prevent their escaping him, but it did him no good, for when Dorothy saw the danger they were in, she stopped and waved her hand and whispered a command to the magic belt. Instantly, the foremost warriors became eggs, which rolled upon the floor of the cavern in such numbers that those behind could not advance without stepping upon them. But when they saw the eggs, all desire to advance departed from the warriors, and they turned and fled madly into the cavern and refused to go back again. The warriors found some eggs. They were not happy with that. Our friends had no further trouble in reaching the end of the passage, and soon were standing in the outer air upon the gloomy path between the two high mountains. But the way to Eve lay plainly before them, and they fervently hoped that they had seen the last of the Gnome King and of his dreadful palace. The cavalcade was led by Ozma, mounted on the Cowardly Lion, and the Queen of Eve, who rode upon the back of the tiger. The children of the Queen walked behind her, hand in hand. Dorothy rode the sawhorse, while the Scarecrow walked and commanded the army in the absence of the Tin Woodman. Presently the way began to lighten, and more of the sunshine to come between the two mountains, and before long they heard the thump, thump, thump of the giant's hammer upon the road. "How may we pass the monstrous man of iron?" asked the Queen, anxious for the safety of her children. But Dorothy solved the problem by a word to the magic belt. The giant paused, with his hammer held motionless in the air, thus allowing the entire party to pass beneath his cast iron legs in safety. I'm going to read one more chapter. This is called The King of Eve. If there were any shifting, rock-colored gnomes on the mountainside now, they were silent and respectful, for our adventurers were not annoyed as before by their impudent laughter. Really, the gnomes had nothing to laugh at since the defeat of their king. On the other side, they found Ozma's golden chariot, standing as they had left it. Soon the lion and tiger were harnessed to the beautiful chariot, in which was enough room for Ozma and the Queen and 6 of the royal children. Little Evering preferred to ride with Dorothy upon the sawhorse, which had a long back. The prince had recovered from his shyness and had become very fond of the girl who had rescued him, so they were fast friends and chatted pleasantly together as they rode along. Billina was also perched upon the head of the wooden steed, which seemed not to mind the added weight in the least, and the boy was full of wonder that a hen could talk and say such sensible things. When they came to the gulf, Ozma's magic carpet carried them all over in safety, and now they began to pass the trees in which birds were singing, and breeze that was wafting to them from the farms of Eve was spicy with flowers and new-mown hay. The sunshine fell full upon them to warm them and drive away from their bodies the chill and dampness of the underground kingdom of the gnomes. I would be quite content," said the Scarecrow to Tik-Tok, were only the Tin Woodman with us, but it breaks my heart to leave him behind." "He was a fine fellow," replied Tik-Tok, "although his material was not very durable." "Oh, tin is an excellent material," the Scarecrow hastened to say, "and if anything ever happened to poor Nick Chopper, he was always easily soldered. Besides, he did not have to be wound up, and was not liable to get out of order." "I sometimes wish," said Tik-Tok, "that I was stuffed with straw as you are. It is hard to be made of copper." "I have no reason to complain of my lot," replied the Scarecrow. "A little fresh straw now and then makes me as good as new, but I can never be to the polished gentleman that my poor departed friend the Tin Woodman was." You may be sure the royal children of Eve and their queen mother were delighted at seeing again their beloved country. And when the towers of the palace of Eve came into view, they could not forbear cheering at the sight. Little Evering, riding in front of Dorothy, was so overjoyed that he took a curious tin whistle from his pocket and blew a shrill blast that made the sawhorse leap and prance in sudden alarm. "What is that?" asked Billina, who had been obliged to flutter her wings in order to keep her seat upon the head of the frightened sawhorse. "That's my whistle," said Prince Evering, holding it out upon his hand. It was in the shape of a little fat pig made of tin and painted green. The whistle was in the tail of the pig. "Where did you get it?" asked the yellow hen, closely examining the toy with her bright eyes. "Why, I picked it up in the Gnome King's palace while Dorothy was making her guesses and put it in my pocket," answered the little prince. Billina laughed, or at least she had made a peculiar cackle that served her for a laugh. "No wonder I couldn't find the Tin Woodman," she said, "and no wonder the magic belt didn't make him appear, or the king couldn't find him either." "What do you mean?" questioned Dorothy. "Why, the prince had him in his pocket," cried Billina, cackling again. "I did not," protested little Evering. "I only took the whistle." "Well then, watch me," returned the hen, and reaching out a claw, she touched the whistle and said, "Eve." Swish! "Good afternoon," said the Tin Woodman, taking off his funnel cap and bowing to Dorothy and the prince. "I think I must have been asleep for the first time since I was made of tin, for I do not remember our leaving the Gnome King." "You've been enchanted," answered the girl, throwing an arm around her old friend and hugging him tight in her joy, "but it's all right now." "I want my whistle," said the little prince, beginning to cry. "Hush!" cautioned Billina. "The whistle is lost, but you may have another when you get home." The Scarecrow had fairly thrown himself upon the bosom of his old comrade. So surprised and delighted was he to see him again, and Tik-Tok squeezed the Tin Woodman's hand so earnestly that he dented some of his fingers. Then they had to make way for Ozma to welcome the Tin Man, and the army caught sight of him and set up a cheer, and everybody was delighted and happy. For the Tin Woodman was a great favorite with all who knew him, and his sudden recovery after they had thought he was lost to them forever was indeed a pleasant surprise. Before long, the cavalcade arrived at the royal palace, where a great crowd of people had gathered to welcome their queen and her 10 children. There was much shouting and cheering, and the people threw flowers in their path, and every face wore a happy smile. They found the Princess Langwidere in her mirrored chamber, where she was admiring one of her handsomest heads, one with rich chestnut hair, dreamy walnut eyes, and a shapely hickory nut nose. She was very glad to be relieved of her duties to the people of Eve, and the queen graciously permitted her to retain her room and her cabinet of heads as long as she lived. Then the queen took her eldest son out upon a balcony that overlooked the crowd of subjects gathered below and said to them, "Here is your future ruler, King Evardo the 15th. He is 15 years of age. He has 15 silver buckles on his jacket, and he is the 15th Evardo to rule the land of Eve." The people shouted their approval 15 times, and even the Wheelers, some of whom were present, loudly promised to obey the new king. So the queen placed a big crown of gold set with rubies upon Evardo's head, and threw an ermine robe over his shoulders, and proclaimed him king, and he bowed gratefully to all his subjects, and then went away to see if he could find any cake in the royal pantry. Ozma of Oz and her people, as well as Dorothy, Tik-Tok, and Billina, were splendidly entertained by the Queen Mother, who owed all her happiness to their kind offices. And that evening the yellow hen was publicly presented with a beautiful necklace of pearls and sapphires as a token of esteem from the new king. And there's Billina with her necklace. And it seems like it might be the end. Dorothy's still there. So we have to find out what happens next. And the last chapter in the book is called The Emerald City. I'll read that tomorrow. Have a great night.